The goal of this presentation is to help you understand how your work in weeks 1 through 3 of this course has been building a foundation for your work in weeks 4 through 6. And it'll help you know how to organize and focus your study in weeks 4 through 6 of this course. It's also designed to help you understand how many projects 4, 5, and 6 flow together as you build towards the final project in this class. And so what I want to do here is, first of all, introduce you to two different types of social science research that are commonly deployed. And what you're basically doing in this class is a kind of mixed method study, a rough study where you combine both quantitative research and qualitative research in order to build towards this final paper. So basically during weeks 1 through 3 of this course, you've been engaging in a kind of simple form of quantitative research. When you hear quantitative research, think numbers. And so that's why we've been looking at local demographics. And basically, when you see those numbers being reported in the first view report, etc., they are descriptive statistics. They're just numbers that describe what kind of phenomena is going in our community. How many people live here? How many males? How many females? How many people of different ethnic backgrounds live here? So we're just looking at the basic numbers to describe our local community. Then we also were introduced to some reports that actually involve inferential statistics. So when you read reports by Pew or Barna Research or even the Chavez National Congregation Study, what you are doing is reading research in which they have gone out to sample the general populace. They can't interview everyone, 300 million people. What you can do statistically, though, is very intentionally choose 3,000 to 5,000 people who represent the overall population of our country, and you ask them questions, and then you can inference from that data what the general populace believes, what they're thinking about religious trends, etc. And so that's what we did in weeks 1 through 3 of this course, and essentially we investigated that quantitative research in order to come up with some kind of problem that we're going to try to investigate in our local context. And that's where now we're going to shift towards a kind of qualitative research agenda during weeks 4 through 6 of this course. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to deploy two common forms of qualitative research. There are many kinds of approaches to qualitative research. You can do case study, you can do ethnography, you can do observational study, you can do focus group studies and interviews and such. We are going to focus in on two types. And Moschella, first of all, describes ethnography as a form of social science research used by sociologists, anthropologists, historians, and other scholars to study living human beings in their social and cultural context. Actually, we're going to do what's called an ethnographic interview. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to go into the context of someone in our community to try to answer our questions, and we're just going to pose questions to them. We're going to interview them, and we're just going to allow them to respond out of their context and their personal experience. And we remember, right, they're just one person representing this whole phenomenon, so we have to keep that in view. But we also want to just believe what they have to say as representing their perspective on the phenomenon that we're trying to investigate. And then secondly, we're going to engage in observational studies. And in market and social science research, it's a common technique to directly observe a setting, context, interaction, or some other phenomena in order to learn about it. And so researchers can observe a variety of things in order to try to discern what's going on in this context. We can observe locations, people, things. We can even look at pictures or websites or videos. And just by observing what's going on there, looking closely at it to try to see what's going on there with regards to the question that we're trying to investigate. And so that's the kind of purpose, that's the process we're going to go through here in the next few weeks. But it's very important that we have a logical and strategic focus to how we pursue this. And so coming out of your investigation, your background research in weeks 1 through 3 of this course should be a kind of problem statement. Typically, when you write an article or if you were to do a full-blown thesis, you would actually do a literature review. And we're kind of doing that by going into that demographic study and writing some background research, national and local demographic research. That's kind of like a form of lit review for us. But what you're doing is you're setting the background to identify some problem, some one critical issue or topic that you're going to investigate. And you really need to be focused here. You need to zero it down to one thing. And so, for example, after looking at all this research and looking at your community, you might land on something like immigrant youth in your local community tending not to attend church. That's a problem, right? And you need to investigate why is that happening. And the goal here is to come up with a kind of process to help us investigate that. Not just coming up with ideas, but actually going out and listening to other people, looking into our community to try to find out what's going on there. Now, Moshella has introduced the idea of research puzzles, and if you look into her text, you'll see the idea of developmental puzzles, mechanical puzzles, comparative puzzles, causal predictive puzzles. And these puzzles can be a helpful way for you to investigate the problem as you try to move towards constructing some research questions to help you investigate specific issues there. But here's the big idea. You need to start with a problem statement. Coming out of your research, what is the one problem that you're going to try to focus in on? And then you need to move towards identifying variables or component parts of that problem. You can't investigate every single variable related to that because problems are complex, right? But what we want to do is we want to break down the problem and say, here are the major 2 to 4 variables that I think are influencing this. So first of all, I would note that this will usually come out of your literature review work or some other preliminary investigation. So you'll start to see those variables coming up when you do some research, and then you want to continue to pursue those variables. So you're not just making it up, you're actually grounding it in some research. In this course, we might be guessing a little bit because we just have a condensed time frame. You don't have enough time to do a full-blown lit review and such, but hopefully coming out of your work in weeks 1 through 3 of the course, you've identified and you're able to ground these variables in some sort of research anyway. So for example, if we're looking at that problem of why Hispanic youth aren't attending church, we might come up with a number of potential variables. Maybe they have time conflicts. Maybe their part-time jobs are getting in the way of them attending services. Maybe there are language barriers, school commitments. Maybe the pressure from local youth are actually inhibiting them from attending church. So we want to try to identify 2 to 4 of those variables. We could brainstorm 100 variables here, but we want to kind of try to land on the 2 to 4 that we're going to try to investigate. And then once we've landed on those variables, we want to start posing research questions. So again, it's important that there be a clear link here from the problem statement to the variables to the research questions that we're going to try to research. So the goal here is to write 3 to 4 research questions that are clearly linked to those 2 to 4 variables. And Moshella notes that a good research question is specific and concrete and leads you in the direction of observable data. So in research, you want to be able to observe or inquire and listen to someone about some specific thing that you are investigating. So for example, if we discern that Hispanic youth are not attending church and one potential variable is the part-time work that they're engaging in, a couple of research questions that we might want to pose are, first of all, 1, why do students tend to work during church hours? And 2, would students attend religious gatherings if they were held at other times? Please note, these research questions are not your interview questions. So we're going to do an ethnographic interview later in this course. These questions are the questions that help give direction to your interview questions, but they are not the same as the research questions. So what we do next is then we try to determine, or we try to build a research methodology based on our research questions. So which research method is there out there that will help me answer my research question? Now in this course, you're actually being forced to experiment with two research methods. First of all, an ethnographic interview, and then secondly, the observational study. So you don't really have a choice here. We're kind of forcing you into these two directions. But what you need to do is try to link up as closely as possible the variable and research question with that methodology that will fit it best. So, for example, if we discern that their work schedule for the part-time work is prohibiting students from participating in religious gatherings, we had those research questions. Well, would they attend if they could and the schedule didn't prohibit? That research question aligns really well with doing an ethnographic interview. You can go out and interview questions. You can ask them questions related to that research question. So it's important to note here that you should design then your interview questions to zero in on that variable and research question that you've identified here. So when you do your ethnographic interview, it should relate to that research question and variable. It shouldn't go off on a whole bunch of other tangents. You should really keep it focused. You're going to want to do some other things that are casual to get to know them in the interview, but at the end of the day, you're trying to answer that research question. And then the second method we're going to use is an observational study. And another variable that we identified for maybe why they're not attending church could be a language barrier. So one thing you could do is actually observe students in a bilingual setting, such as a church service, to try to discern through observation, is there a language barrier here? And because of that language barrier, they're just not interested in attending, say, a local Hispanic church or actually an English-speaking church. What's going on? Is there some kind of language barrier that's contributing to this? And an observational study could help you try to solve that research problem.